It's Thursday, May 8th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast. It is a hell of a day to talk ball, and join me to do just that is Andy Behrens. Andy, what's going on, buddy?
It is legitimately a hell of a day to talk ball, especially for, I don't know, like you're not guaranteed that an early day in May is going to be a hell of a day to talk ball, but we have real things to discuss. We have fun trade. We got mock draft results. It's a good day.
You're right. I shouldn't have been so sarcastic and said, is it a hell of a day to talk ball? Because it is a hell of a day to talk ball. We have a lot to get to on this show today. We are going to break down a big trade at the wide receiver position, George Pickens going to the Dallas Cowboys. And then what we actually had on the docket for today is to break down our very first Yahoo Fantasy Staff 2025 mock draft. It's a 10-teamer. It's a half PPR. Andy Behrens wrote up the damn thing. It's going to be pretty electric. We're going to get into all that on today's show, but let's start off with the news of the week. Yes, you rarely get a big headline here in the middle of, not even in the middle, in like early May. We think this stuff's all done. Not so fast. George Pickens has been traded to the Dallas Cowboys. Details of the trade, as you probably know by now, he's going for basically a third round pick. There's a pick swap in 2027. Pittsburgh gets a fifth. Dallas sends the sixth. Who cares? For all intents and purposes, Pickens has been traded to the Dallas Cowboys for a third round pick. So, Andy, what was your first reaction when you saw this news break early morning yesterday?
My actual first reaction was I think it's a little curious that this didn't happen during the draft or in advance of the draft, right? And I don't know what that says about, maybe I do know what it says about what the Cowboys thought of the 2025 draft class at receiver, because they had been so, the most common mock pick was really to give the Cowboys either McMillan or Golden. And instead, they surely were having this dialogue all along, right? But they didn't. I don't know. They didn't make the trade for a pick in this upcoming draft. It's also one of those things where like finally we know the landing spot for Pickens. And shout out to you, because you have been talking about how the Steelers are probably going to trade Pickens since maybe even before DK Metcalf arrived there.
Yes.
So like this was a shoe that was probably going to drop. The Cowboys obviously needed to do something, and it was just a question of whether, are they involved in the trade market, or there's still a couple of pretty interesting veterans out there. Were they going to go after one of those guys? They weren't perfect fits. They would have been weird fits with the team. So it's a good spot for Pickens. Again, I find it curious that this didn't happen before the draft.
Yeah, I had that same kind of reaction too about it being, interesting that this didn't happen before the draft, but by all of the reporting coming out, by the way, just unbelievable that we have a fifth round pick just slotted in. If you're watching this on YouTube, just slotted in as the Cowboys starting running back. That's still a spot that's like, all right, we solved that wide receiver 2 problem for the Cowboys. I don't know about all right, just Jaden Blue, sub 200 pound running back is just our starting back. I'm skeptical of that, but this is producer Colin's show, not mine, when we talk about the Cowboys, if we're all being honest here. So Jaden Blue's your starting running back. Congratulations. But anyways, back to the Pickens thing.
By the way, we've learned a lot about producer Colin's Cowboys fandom over the last several days. We'll get into that later as we discuss the mock.
Yes, for the Brennan heads out there, the producer Colin fans, we got some heartbreaking revelations to get into throughout the course of this podcast, but that will be coming up shortly. On this Pickens trade, getting back to it, it's not like by all the reporting, it sounds like the Steelers were intent on getting a day 2 pick out of this, because the Cowboys reportedly offered a 4th round pick before the draft, whatever. The Steelers said, no, we want it. We're holding out for a day 2. They were willing to wait until after the draft and get a 2026 day 2 pick if it just meant they were getting a day 2 pick, which I think is curious and I think is actually instructive. It's pretty telling that just the Steelers, who theoretically are in the win now, kind of short-term window with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, theoretically, right? This is all in theory. The longer this goes, the more I'm suspicious. It is what it is. But that they were willing to get 2026 assets, where they now, I think, have 12 picks in the 2026 draft. So that's interesting, again, when we think about where the Steelers see themselves right now. A lot of mixed messages. But it's telling that they were willing to say, like, yeah, we are not even just interested in George Pickens at all on our team this year, like it was over. And as you said, I've been talking about this actually since the Super Bowl. I mentioned in our reaction podcast, Andy, that the Chiefs should think about trading for George Pickens because I thought he was going to be available back then. And then coming back from the combine, when I talked to a few people there, I was like, oh, this relationship is over. It's only a matter of time. Then when they trade for DK Metcalf, that like seals it. And by the way, like that's telling too that they have a 24-year-old receiver who is in his prime and has been a productive player for them. They're willing to go outside their building for a player who has similar strengths and weaknesses and plays the exact same position, not just WR, but the X receiver position. Go outside their building, trade assets for DK Metcalf and pay that guy. And like, we're and pay him. Yeah. So they were done with Pickens. They were ready to get off the roller coaster. And that's again, this is informative of what the Cowboys are getting here. And I thought that it's important to talk about the Steelers angle of this thing first, Andy. And I wrote this up on the website as well. People can check out my reaction piece there because we framing the trade in that way for like what the Steelers, the decision that they made to get off the train of George Pickens, that's an ownership decision, that's a front office decision, that's a coaching staff decision. And it was pretty unanimous here that we would rather take a pick next year that does not help us this year to just not have George Pickens play football for us this year. And there are reasons for that. We can get into it. And it is because of the highs and lows of him as a player. Yeah. And that's, again, important to frame for what the Cowboys are getting, even if I like the trade. And you can say all that and still like the trade. And I do like the trade for Dallas.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. And I think that's a good note to close on too, right? Like we'll get into the Dallas side of it. And I do like it for Dallas, like just fit wise. It's fantastic. With Pittsburgh, it's tough because they're still a work in progress, right? Like they have an Aaron Rodgers shaped hole at quarterback, and they're just waiting for Aaron Rodgers to arrive. And they have a potentially now Keenan Allen shaped hole at receiver, and we have to wait for that to play out, right? Like I don't think they're done at receiver. I mean, like Austin had some moments last year. There's definitely like a Roman Wilson hive out there. There's people who want to see that stuff happen, but I think if you're bringing in Aaron Rodgers, the usual suspects that they'll be in on. They'll kick the tires on Allen Lazard, and there's a couple of veteran receivers out there that can be signed that are more sensible fits and probably easier to manage than George Pickens was. So this is like the Steelers are just not complete yet, and it's very difficult to make value judgments about different pieces here, and it's a little bit pointless when we think they're probably going to still add a couple of major pieces to the offense.
I will say I'll be a little bit surprised if they make like a Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper edition. I know those are the big names that people are tossing around right now. I mean, Keenan Allen was legitimately one of the worst blocking receivers in the league last year. And I know that's not the first thing that you normally say when you talk about a wide receiver, but when you're talking about a wide receiver too in this offense, like think about the guys that Arthur Smith has used as his wide receiver too before. It's like Mac Hollins, it's the dirty work guys. It's Van Jefferson last year. Like there were games where Van Jefferson outsnapped George Pickens last year because he's better like as the condensed formation blocker type option. So I actually think it's more likely they roll into the season with Calvin Austin, who they like a lot and I kind of like as well. They're still hopeful about Roman Wilson and like Robert Woods. I think it's more likely they roll into the season with those guys, but I do think they'll at least kick around like the trade market. There's been some whispers. Could they try to shoot a pick? And again, they have 12 picks in next year's draft. I believe it's definitely at least double digits, but I think it's like 11 or 12. Could they throw a day 3 pick at the Packers for Romeo Doubs? It's like a guy who has familiarity with Aaron Rodgers and is definitely more interesting than the usual like Lazard Cobb, contingent of players. So I think it is possible they make a move like that. And then, but that to me does not really affect DK Metcalf, who I think comes out as a big winner here because he's just going to dominate. It's going to be a run heavy offense. We know that, but he's going to dominate the targets here. And I do think he fits well from like a route deployment perspective, but let's move to Pickens in Dallas and where we're kind of ranking him, imagining him. Again, I think it's instructive to go through the journey of what last season was, because I was talking about at the early portion of last year, like the first 4 weeks, that I thought Pickens was playing the best football of his career. And ironically, like right after I kind of go out with that take in week 5 against the Cowboys,
the Dallas game,
funny. The Dallas game, he plays just 58.6% of the snaps and he comes under a lot of fire for obviously like jogging through routes, his effort, his focus, just not being fully engaged when the play is not going his way. The film was just kind of brutal, but then Pickens has a really good stretch of games with Russell Wilson under center, typical Russell Wilson stuff, go balls, stop routes, all that perimeter stuff. Then he misses 3 games with an injury. He comes back to play the final 2 games of the regular season. It's a pretty ugly game against the Chiefs in a Christmas Day loss where he's again comes under fire for like jogging through routes and maybe causing an interception for Russell Wilson. He goes catchless in week 18 against the Bengals, who like needed that game to stay alive for their playoff race. It's multiple drops. It's miscues at the catch point. And then in the first half of the blowout loss in the playoffs to the Baltimore Ravens, he has 1 catch, 8 yards, and an offensive pass interference penalty in the first half of that game. So again, it's the roller coaster of Pickens, right? That's what the Cowboys, the Steelers said, enough. We want off this ride. The Cowboys, for the price of a 3rd-round pick and a glaring hole at their X receiver position, are like, yeah, let me get on that ride here. And again, it makes perfect sense, Andy, right? From a schematic standpoint, he's the vertical X receiver. I mean, shoot, and like he's not an unproductive player. He's not like an idea of a player. 3.16 yards per route run against man coverage per True Media over the last 2 years is only behind Nico Collins, CeeDee Lamb, and A.J. Brown. Like in what he does, he is very, very good at doing that.
Yeah, I know I've described him before as like, is he the best bad player in the league? Is he the worst great player in the league? Right? He's in that yeah. Weird zone. He's also like normally when a receiver is traded in the NFL, like the checklist of things that we look at in terms of evaluating fit and fantasy value going forward. Like what does the quarterback situation look like? How many targets are available? What's the upside of this offense? All that. How's he going to be used? And like you start running down that checklist, it's great, right? Like you can. Yeah. This is a really good fit with Dak Prescott. Obviously, Dak has been somebody who's been a top of the ranks fantasy quarterback before. The target availability is obvious because it was just kind of a rotating cast of Jalen's as the number 2 receiver last year. Like there's a wide open opportunity there. But the real variables that are going to determine where George Pickens goes they don't have anything to do with anybody else but him, right? They're all like within his control. It's stuff that we don't normally have to think about with NFL players, right? It's engagement, it's effort, it's are we gonna see a couple of game wrecking penalties today? It's just if you could guarantee, you can't. This is the whole point of George Pickens. But if you could guarantee that we were going to get just a locked in George Pickens who is playing for his 2nd contract, I'd be like, hell yeah, let's go. This is, the best possible version of George Pickens is, it's like a 1,250 yard receiver on 100 targets and we get 10 touchdowns and it's perfect. It's great for fantasy. He's among the best of the wide receiver twos. Like that's, that is definitely out there for him. And he's obviously well paired with CeeDee Lamb. Again, one of the bummers of this to me is that I think it's going to wake people up a little bit to how underranked Dak Prescott had been. We'll get to Dak Prescott a little bit later in the show when we start talking about the mock draft. Like that guy was the MVP runner-up 2 years ago. He led the NFL in touchdown passes. We're like a year removed from that. He's had a 4,900 yard passing season. He's really good. He's been a really, really good fantasy asset over the years. And have there been some ugly moments too? Sure. But his best fantasy seasons have been like upper tier stuff. And he's really getting slept on. And I don't know if that's the return from injury. I don't know exactly what that is. Maybe it's just the fact that we're more interested in a bunch of 2nd-year quarterbacks. I have no idea. But Dak Prescott is very likely in a healthy season to be a top 8-ish fantasy quarterback. And most people seem to have him like QB 18, QB 20. But he's a better player than that.
Well, I think now that he has CeeDee Lamb, one of the best receivers in the league, and George Pickens, who I think fits really well as a really good number 2 receiver, that just looks so much better on paper than yeah, CeeDee Lamb and like a rotating cast of characters. You know, we were starting to get like the post-draft cope of like, well, of course they didn't get Ted McMillan. They wanted Ted McMillan at 12, but they didn't get McMillan there. But they didn't have to take another receiver. They traded a fourth for Jonathan Mingo, like in the middle of the season. You know, he's just learning the offense. Okay, like now that we've got that out of the way, and it's CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. These guys work so well together. Again, because CeeDee Lamb, he's leads the NFL in the last 2 years with yards from the slot. Now he could play all three positions, but he's maximized as an interior player. Whereas Pickens is a boundary guy. We've thrown the stat up a couple times on the screen, but Pickens is one of the league leaders in terms of 15+ yard plays on go routes. Dak Prescott over the last 2 years is super productive on those. Like this heat map that we're throwing on the screen at YouTube right now, like you see just again where they've caught the ball. It makes so much sense. So Pickens, I think actually fits really well here. And by the way, I also like that he, you know, who knows if like this part of it is the reporting, whatever. But reportedly, he doesn't want to sign a contract right now. He wants to show like I'm a top guy. He's playing with the best quarterback he's ever played with by a mile. He's probably playing. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I want to say like the best. It's a better offensive ecosystem than damn like Matt Canada, stuff like that. So I'm saying that we got to hedge a little bit because we don't know who Brian Schottenheimer is necessarily. It's been a minute since we've seen him as like the de facto head offensive mind. So just hedging on that a little, but it should be by far the best offensive ecosystem he has ever played in. So I like that. I think he should be motivated, but the range of outcomes for Pickens is still like, incredible season where he cashes in big time next year on the open market, and he's suspended in week 6 for like conduct detrimental to the team. That is the range of outcomes here. Right. It's very wide. One of my buddies who's a Cowboys fan defined this as either way, it's going to be explosive. And I think that's the right way to say it. So to put a button on the fantasy ranking for Pickens, I had him pretty much like buried if he was going to remain on the Steelers in this offense with, again, this quarterback with his skill set, how well he fits it. Shoot, like even if he gives them like the 2019 Michael Gallup season where he had 12.8 points per game. And I think like that's like, again, assuming he's on the field and engaged, like that's the minimum of what they can get from him is like 2019 Michael Gallup, where he was the boundary X receiver and kind of just working in tandem with a move around guy and Amari Cooper at that point. It wasn't CeeDee Lamb yet. Like that's great. It's probably going to be volatile, but that slots him to me in a tier of guys like around the wide receiver 30-ish, like Devontae Smith, Jameson Williams, Chris Olave, Jordan Addison, Jalen Waddle, Jaden Reed. Like all these guys are probably number 2s except Olave, but there's going to be a lot of like season long numbers good, weekly numbers very volatile. So to me, that's where I ended up slotting him, Andy. And like I'm very interested in drafting George Pickens in that range.
Yeah, that's where I've got him. I think he fits nicely in that range of receivers who are the number 2 for their own team, but they're only the number 2 for their own team because their team has like a mega star receiver, right? It's Jordan Addison with Jefferson. It's Jalen Waddle with Tyreek Hill. And now I think Pickens fits in there nicely. I think you said it well. We're going to get, his scoring is going to be up and down because that's just how it goes with these guys. It's going to be a little bit more touchdown dependent. You probably already felt that way about Pickens. He wasn't necessarily a locked in every week, top 15, top 20 wide receiver, even when things are going well. A little bit of volatility there. I also think it's worth mentioning that 2 years ago, when Dak had the big season, like people may forget it, but Brandon Cooks in the second half of that year was a top 20 wide receiver, and he caught a touchdown every week. And I think we like George Pickens more than Brandon Cooks, right? Like even the version of Brandon Cooks from a couple years ago.
That version of Brandon Cooks, I would say we definitely like George Pickens better.
Yeah. So, and that's what, I mean, that is legitimately what Cooks was doing. I think he finished the season with like 8 touchdowns and he got most of them in the second half of the year. And I don't know, it can look like that for Pickens. Like if you told me that George Pickens was going to catch 70 balls and like 13 or 14 touchdowns, I would say that is a definite possibility. And that would also be a strong indication that Dak is going to stay healthy. And if Dak stays healthy, I think it's, and again, Pickens can be locked in. I think that's a really good setup.
Yeah, really good setup. Again, assuming even process wise, I think this is the right move for the Cowboys. So everybody's a winner, I think, from this. I think Pickens is a winner. I think Metcalf is a winner now that like this is officially done. It's great news. It's great news for the Cowboys. Even CeeDee Lamb, like if he doesn't have that Dalton was hyping him up as potentially the number one overall pick in fantasy this year because he could like reach 200 targets. He probably doesn't have 200 targets in his range of outcomes anymore, but with Pickens as the wide receiver too, instead of Jalen Tolbert and the boys, you're going to score more touchdowns. More touchdowns is good for everybody involved. So I think a lot of winners in Pittsburgh, a lot of winners in Dallas. And frankly, I'm a winner for having said this all off season. Now I don't look like a total dumbass. So we'll see. I might have to go back to some Instagram comments for people telling me that this would never happen. So we'll see. So in the meantime, though, I think we're so petty. Okay. In the meantime,
you are the biggest winner of the George Pickens trade. Everybody is saying it.
Yeah. Everybody's saying it, frankly. A lot of people have been saying that. Many people across the world. But yes, we're going to toss to our first break because that was a pretty beefy breakdown. But that's what you got to do. In May, you get a trade in May involving two of the more prominent franchises in the league and a pretty big name in George Pickens. You got to give it a little bit of a beefy rundown here. On the other side of it, we'll come back and we will talk through our first staff mock draft of the fantasy season right after this. All right, we are back. As mentioned, we all got together, participated in a big staff mock draft. All your favorites and, me, all your favorites and me got together and participated in a big Yahoo Fantasy staff mock draft. We had Andy in the mix. We had Scott. We had Dalton, our fearless leader, Jason Klobaka, a bunch of people from the editorial side of things. We even, pity invited producer Colin so that Andy could be mean to him specifically in his article, probably, and certainly on this podcast. So let's waste no more time, Andy. Let's get into it here. Running back. Let's start with the running backs. What are your kind of takeaways at that position?
Yeah, in the write-up of the mock, I highlighted three different things, and the first of them was running back depth, which I think is it hasn't felt like this in a while, and it could all be a mirage, right? I think that this is the impact of a really, really good draft class at the running back position, right? We've had this group of, 6, 7, 8 guys come into the league that we're all pretty interested in. And are they all going to hit? Of course not. Like as a practical matter, one of these guys is going to get hurt in training camp, and two of them are going to fall into committees that we don't see coming. And, it's going to two of them are, I don't know, two of them are just going to bust. And it's not going to be as clean and as tidy as we think it's going to be. But there's a great deal of enthusiasm for this rookie class. And they all kind of went in a clump as if they were like a single tier of backs. And it's just made, it's made the running back position feel incredibly deep. This is, the old timers like me will think of it as this is what it felt like in the 90s. This is what it felt like when everybody was projected for 300 touches, right? It looks really good. And so one of my notions going into this thing, did you have a strategy where you just oh, I can't believe I have to do this nonsense in May? Or did you actually have a strategy as you were approaching this mock?
I mean, definitely
it's the
latter,
former, right? You were I can't believe I have to do this nonsense.
It was definitely that. I mean, but in terms of strategy, once the board unveils itself and you get into the app and you're like, all right, I'm locked in, let's go. Yeah, then I kind of had a strategy, which honestly works well to your point here. It's continue, but mine was around the running back position here.
Yeah. So I was gonna go hero RB all the time. And just, if I'm doing mock drafts, I'm gonna try some stuff that I may or may not do when we actually get into drafting season for real and we care about the teams. I'm just gonna mess around and do some stuff. And you could also tell that Dalton had a notion that he was gonna go zero RB. And Dalton ended up with a couple of the rookie running backs, and he took them late. And so I think there was something to the fact that Dalton and I were just pounding receivers unnecessarily at some level, because the way this league was actually structured was 2 starting running backs, 2 starting wide receivers, and a flex. And if you were actually in a league with those settings, you'd fill out those starting positions before you were pounding wide receivers. But most of the leagues I'm actually going to play in, we got 2, 3 flexes, we got 3 starting wide receivers, and so for me it became a test of wide receiver depth, and we'll get to that later. And, I had a belief going in that I was going to feel pretty good about the running back position and what I was able to get in round 7, round 8, whenever I decided to start drafting it again. And I feel like that I feel like that played out pretty well. One of my takeaways was certainly that like the what is normally thought of as the running back dead zone, and you can define that however you like. Usually it's somewhere beginning somewhere around round 4-ish, extending through like round 8, round 9, right, where it's just a minefield of running backs who, we think they have. We think they're in line for a lot of touches, but we don't know if they're good. There's like a bunch of messy players in there, but it's not like that now. Like if you look at the 5th round in our draft, and it's like Ken Walker, and it's David Montgomery, and it's James Conner, and like Alvin Kamara waited until the 6th round, and I don't think we seriously doubt what Alvin Kamara's role is going to be, nor what his talent is relative to anybody else on that team. Like these are good players who, as long as they stay healthy, are going to be incredibly productive running backs for you. And again, those guys are getting pushed into the dead zone. That's not what the dead zone is supposed to be. And then after those guys, we got that real wave of non-genty rookie running backs, right? And they all kind of went in a big flurry. It was like a little subcategory position run that happened. All of them go off the board. I think it started with Caleb Johnson, and it went like RJ Harvey, and then we finished up with like Henderson and Judkins, but they all just went in a clump. And then another wave of rookies hit later in like rounds 9 through 11. And that's when I jumped back into running back. And I took Cam Scatterbo. That's where Colin took Bajal Tutin over Jaden Blue, his guy, who he's been hyping like incessantly. So that was our first indication that Colin's Cowboys fandom is maybe a little bit fraudulent, and that he can't really be trusted on Cowboys matters. Yeah. And then the running backs at the very end, like the end game running backs before we started taking defenses and kickers, because Jason wanted us to take defenses and kickers. They're still good names. They were Jaylen Warren, they were Najee Harris, they're Jordan Mason. J.K. Dobbins went super J.K. Dobbins is going to sign somewhere, maybe in Dallas. He's going to get a ton of carries. Like he's still going to be a good player. He was a very good player last year. Isaac Guerrero goes late. We know his contingent value. Tank Bigsby was really good last year. Charbonnet, like it was a big group of really useful names who I think if you're drafting like a 0 RB team, those are better than the names that you were seeing in the final rounds last year. So it just like all things considered, running back, again, it's running back, and it's fantasy football. So this is probably all going to get flipped on its head, and it's not going to seem this like we're going to be laughing about the fact that we thought running back was deep when we get into October. I get it, but right now, as you look at the landscape, it looks crazy deep.
No, that's a pretty fair point. And, to harken back to like my strategy here was I just liked the running back pick over the receiver picks for a long portion into this draft, especially early. So I ended up going pretty running back heavy. I think I took Derrick Henry at the 6th overall pick, and then Josh Jacobs at the 5th pick in the 2nd round, which there's no way that's going to work, because that would have been a great 1-2 last year. There's just no way that's the thing with running back. I know this is like stupid analysis, but it's just last year, the older guys that changed teams stayed healthy. Older obviously is relative at the running back position. They all stayed healthy. They were workhorses. It just, again, stupid analysis, but it feels like and I'm saying we as the guy that just did this draft, are kind of baking in that that's just going to happen again, right? And it probably won't. And in a way, I just, again, when I looked at the board, at the 6th overall pick, I liked Derrick Henry better than I liked Justin Jefferson, Puka Nacua, Malik Neighbors, Nico Collins, the guys who went right after him. I just thought he was a better pick there. But then coming back in round 2, I again felt with Nico Collins, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Brian Thomas having gone off the board right before me, I just liked Josh Jacobs better than I liked Ladd McConkey, better than I liked any of the, Drake London or any of those receiver picks. I thought he just was the better selection there. But then to your point about this rookie running back run, because I would argue that if there is a running back dead zone this year, I actually think it's even earlier than expected, because these guys are getting pushed up the board. it's like round 3 Devon Achane. It's like round 3 James Cook. Like there are holes in those guys' profile. You know, dude, Breece Hall in the 4th round. Like, is he even going to play for the Jets this year? Chase Brown, I took Joe Mixon in the 4th round. I don't know if I love that. Like, again, good ceilings on all those guys if they stay healthy and reach their range of outcomes. But I think the range of outcomes is a little bit wider. But because I'd already locked up running back in rounds 1 to 4, I really hated the fact that I kind of had to sit on my hands as RJ Harvey is going off the board, as Caleb Johnson is going off the board, as Amarian Hampton is going off the board, because I needed receivers there. So I think we'll talk about receivers here in a second, mixed feelings on a lot of those selections. To me, I just feel as if I don't want to hammer running back that hard, even if I do like the picks relative to the wide receivers early on.
I thought that Derrick Henry was going to be the back that I got in the 1st round. I was picking 8th overall, and I ended up with Ashton Genty, but I wasn't zeroed in on Ashton Genty. It happens to be exactly where I have him ranked in the overall. So maybe that was it just ended up being really, really chalky. But I don't know. I expected people to pass on Henry. I don't know. He's one of those guys where the numbers always come in flawlessly, right? Derrick Henry in a healthy season is giving us 15 touchdowns. Derrick Henry in a healthy season is probably giving us 1,400, 1,500 rushing yards. It's just, and he doesn't, we're not talking about somebody who has a high level of injury risk attached. We're not talking about somebody who there are no known worries coming into the season. He looked great at the end of last year. Yeah, he's a little older. I thought he would fall in this one. Whatever, he didn't. I'm fine with Genty. I think Genty might lead the league in touches. I think he's great. I think it's fine. But then if we had really been playing this league out and I were actually drafting the settings as they exist, I think I probably would have jumped in that rookie run somewhere. I believe it was producer Colin who actually took Caleb Johnson, and that stung a little bit because I might have been tempted to build around Caleb, but it was fine. I was kind of testing the idea of how late can I jump back in at running back and still feel okay about my second guy. And I don't know. I don't know if I feel okay about my second guy because I waited all the way until it was Cam Scatterbo time, and that might work out. He went within 3 picks of Tyrone Tracy, I think, and that's probably a 2-man committee. I think he is somebody who could take over a full workload. I think Tracy was running on fumes at the end of last year, so I think his best use is probably as a 50% of the touches kind of guy, and I think we may see that this year. So we'll see if something like that actually worked out. But if we'd really been playing these settings, I probably would have jumped back in on running back in round 6, round 7, and I would have felt really good about whoever I got there.
Yeah, I didn't take any rookie running backs, and I hated it. I really wanted to come away with one of those guys. So again, that is definitely a lesson for me that when we get to again, I took three quote older backs, second team backs, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon in rounds 1, 2, and 4, with T. Higgins as my wide receiver 1 in round 3. I don't know if I'm doing that in the real thing. Okay. Again, even if I the guy actually, I really in round 3, round 4, I really wanted to take a quarterback. I did not want to take Joe Mixon there, but right before me, Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, and Lamar Jackson in that order had gone. And I just think those guys are so clearly ahead of everybody else at the quarterback position. Even Jalen Hurts, I think those guys are so clearly ahead. So there's a drop off there, and I wasn't going to take anyone else in the 4th round. So that was just, to me, where I think I erred was the Mixon pick. Not that I wanted any of those receivers there. And again, we'll get to the receivers in a second. But yeah, that's just sort of how I'm feeling about running back. I will say, when you get to the later portion after the rookies go, and again, I think I would advise people to save a pick for a Travion Henderson, a Quinshon Judkins, a Caleb Johnson, all the guys that we've talked about. There's a lot of unsettled backfields. When you get into the Pacheco, Brian Robinson, Tyron Tracy, and the Jaguars guys, Producer Colin took Basil Tootin first. I think I took I took Tank Bigsby later on. Travis Etienne went in the 12th round. I was glad someone made that decision for me because I was like, I don't want to take Travis Etienne, but I want to get one of these Jaguars backs just in case we're all wrong. Just in case we're all rookie fevering Basil Tootin. And I was kind of glad that it was Tank Bigsby, who I just think is a better player. But there are definitely some unsettled backfields where we don't have a clear RB1, and there are a little bit more of like kind of paths to upside with those guys than like not even just injury upside, right? Like someone from that Isaiah Pacheco, Brian Robinson, Tyron Tracy group, like somebody's the clear RB1 in their backfield. Yeah. And I mean, Giants aside, like Chiefs and Washington, that's two of the best offenses in the league.
Yeah, we're starting to get like off-season workout videos of Isaiah Pacheco, like, you know, trying to offer proof of concept that he is back and fully operational. And clearly, when he came back from the broken leg last year, he lacked his normal explosiveness. And you know, for him to fall into a situation in which Kareem Hunt was getting meaningful carries ahead of him, like this version of Kareem Hunt, not great. So he does have a lot to prove. I do still think, though, that like if he hits, his upside looks exactly like what we were talking about going into last season. And I think if he'd stayed healthy last season, he would have been one of the success stories. Like, he looked really good early on. He was, you know, man, I mean, Kareem Hunt was a totally fantasy relevant back while not actually playing very well and not making anybody miss. And I think, you know, if you could have plugged a healthy Isaiah Pacheco into that, it would have looked great. I really like the Tank Bigsby pick. And that's a guy who was, you know, if you like, you know, yards after contact, like there were few better at it last year. He was really, really good. Some of the underlying data on Bigsby looked awesome. The problem with him is he's not great with like thrown objects, right? They're not. He's not the guy who's going to be on the field when it's time to pass the ball or when we might pass the ball. I mean, his presence on the field is kind of a tell, right? So he's limited in that respect. And I too am glad that I did not end up with, at some point, just for like integrity of the mock, I might have taken Ramondre Stevenson or Travis Etienne. I'm glad I didn't do it because I don't really have any faith in either player after last year.
Stevenson, I think, could hold a little bit more of an important role than Etienne could. But yeah, because the damn social team blasted out a graphic of me saying like Travis Etienne will not be in my draft plans, you know, I was like, well, I can't very well take Travis Etienne, but we're gonna get to a point where, like you said, the integrity here. We're in the damn 12th round. I gotta take him. Like I need to take an upside stab at running back after getting all those locked in workhorses early. I need somebody on my bench that I think could outkick that. I took Jordan Mason too, kind of in a similar vein in round 10. Like, dude, Jordan Mason, I actually just had to part with him I had to part with him in a dynasty trade a couple days ago because and I know you shouldn't do this, but I was dead set on getting Kyle Williams, and the person ahead of me in the second round took him. So I was like, what do I have to do to get from 2.8 to 2.7 so that I can be the one with Kyle Williams? And it involved like a 3-way trade that it just totally derailing the entire proceedings just so I could get Kyle Williams in the second round of this rookie draft, because I was like, I'm pissed. I need him. I need to have him again. I know this is not good dynasty portfolio managing, but whatever. It was what needed to be done. But part of that trade involved me parting with Jordan Mason. I was kind of like, I just feel like there's a moment this year where I'm going to really regret not having Jordan Mason on this roster, because Aaron Jones is going to be a little nicked up, and they clearly went out and got him, and they gave him a 2-year contract. So yeah, I think he's a really nice pick in the 10th round, very similar in this vein.
Yeah, I was just looking to see where he went in this draft, because I remember when he went off the board. I did not remember that you specifically took him, but I was, he was like top of the queue player for me. I mean, that's a guy who's going to have a regular weekly recurring role, I imagine, alongside Aaron Jones. And obviously, if and when anything happens to Aaron Jones, I mean, Jordan Mason was one of the clear right answers in fantasy football last year for like 6 or 7 weeks, right? Like he was carrying you in that, and it was a foreseeable situation because he was the primary backup to Christian McCaffrey, and he's in a little bit different situation now, but he was really, really good. So as a 0 RB target, like what a perfect player. So I thought the value on him was really, really good. The one other thing that I kept thinking, like early in this draft, there's no way I think that you personally, Matt Harmon, want to have like the 5th or 6th pick in a draft, because I remember thinking as receivers started flying off the board after you took Derrick Henry, which, hey, Derrick Henry's a great pick, but then like all these great receivers go, right? Like Jefferson goes and Nakua goes, Neighbors. And then the start of the second round is Collins and St. Brown and Brian Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you took Josh Jacobs. And like, I don't know, in as much as you can like feel gutted by anything that's happening in a mock draft, you shouldn't. But insofar as you can, that must have really like you must have been sitting there being like, oh man, I do not want to have this pick when we're drafting for real.
No, I don't know. I kind of disagree because we'll get into the receiver position actually in just a second. We're going to take a break and get into it because I have some thoughts just about the way the board is structured this year that I'm still kind of parsing out. But I actually it's not that I don't like those receivers early. I mean, yeah, Neighbors, awesome. Puka Nacua, awesome. Justin Jefferson, no kidding, great player. Nico Collins could be the wide receiver 1 overall this year. I think that is very squarely within his range of outcomes. He was doing it, putting it in the box score before he got injured last year. St. Brown, Brian, all these guys. Maybe I regret taking the second running back, but over a Drake London type or a Ladd McConkey, AJ Brown even, but. Yeah, I kind of disagree just because I think there's some interesting receivers going later. But with that, Andy, actually, that's a perfect transition. Let's take another break. We get back. We'll talk through the wide receiver position on the other side right after this. All right, we are back. Let's talk wide receivers here. Andy, you wrote a very similar line to, I feel like, what you write every year with these mock drafts, which is wide receiver is fine until it suddenly isn't. So explain your thought process here.
I feel probably more. I feel strongly about this this year, probably more so than I have in the past. I honestly feel, and I wrote this in the mock draft write up. It's like a whole tier of receivers has gone missing, and I don't like. I like some of the late round receivers, and I like some of the mid draft receivers. But there is a step down from a group that I felt totally comfortable with. You know, we're drafting and it's like round 4, round 5, round 6, and it's Devontae Adams and it's DJ Moore and it's Zay Flowers, and I feel really great about those guys. And then like very suddenly Rome Odunze and Jerry Jeudy are at the top of the queue, and you know the Kansas City receivers who both have some question marks coming into the season are at the top of the queue, and like. I don't know. It just felt like there were 10 missing receivers there, and we should transition a little more smoothly. And another one of the things, and some of this was influenced by the fact again that like, you know, Dalton is drafting a 0 RB team. I'm drafting a hero RB team. So we're really pounding some of the marquee receivers early, and there's probably a few names that are going off the board that if we were actually playing out these settings, it wouldn't have looked exactly the same way, but. Man, we hit like round 5 or so, and I didn't love the receivers that were on the board, and I was happy to start taking like a quarterback and a tight end in that range too, while I was still waiting at running back. And then like, I mentioned earlier that I feel like the traditional running back dead zone, those running backs are actually pretty good this year. I almost felt like there was a wide receiver dead zone that hit in the exact same spot that the running back dead zone is supposed to be, right? Like you get into round 6 and it was fine for a little while, like Devontae Smith and DK Metcalf go, and I feel really good about those two. And then like, boom, we hit the Kansas City receivers. And Rome Odunze goes, and next round we're looking at Chris Godwin was actually in play to be the wide receiver 1 overall, but there is a health question mark there, right? And that's where Travis Hunter goes, and then some of the high variance wide receiver 2 types like Addison, like George Pickens, McMillan goes there. It's not Jaden Reed comes off the board, Brandon Ayuk, right? Not to say that these guys aren't really good and that they couldn't have great 2025 outcomes. But all of a sudden, it's a group of receivers where you can also see how things can go wrong, right? Like Rome Odunze, who went in the 6th round, is going to have to re-earn targets. He's all of a sudden faced with a pretty crowded receiving core, and there was an argument for him like 2-3 weeks ago that was, well, who else are they going to throw to? Well, now we have options, right? So like that's not a clear cut situation at all. I don't, after Ayuk, we get Jerry Jeudy, we get Chris Olave. Both of them have obvious issues. Stephon Diggs is coming up. Like you can just see how things could possibly go wrong for all these guys. There's health question marks. There's quarterback question marks. It gets to be a murky group, and there's going to be a lot of bad answers in that range, in that round 6 to round 9 range, I think.
So it's not that I disagree with anything you just said from a range of outcomes, and like some of those are going to be bad answers perspective, what you just said. I will say I can also paint a pretty good ceiling case for a lot of those guys that you just mentioned there. The Chiefs receivers, Rome Odunze, definitely Chris Olave, Jameson Williams. I took Travis Hunter in the 7th round. I can obviously paint a good ceiling case there. Even Jordan Addison had a really nice year last year. The thing is, Andy, I actually don't see that big of a difference between those guys and the dudes we were taking late round 3 into round 5. Like, why is there a multiple gap difference? You took Tyreek Hill. Couldn't pay me to take Tyreek Hill in the 3rd round, but that's kind of another story. But like, what's the big difference between any of those guys you just laid out there and Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr., Cortland Sutton in round 5, I thought was kind of aggressive. You meant DJ Moore. Like, I think DJ Moore and Rome Odunze should be more like neck and neck ranked. And I see there's like a gap in consensus rankings between those two guys. I think they have just as much of a same like ceiling to floor outcome. I took Zay Flowers in the 5th round. I'm not even sure I think there's a big difference between Zay Flowers and a Jameson Williams type necessarily, not really. Maybe the number one, like Flowers is kind of a weird, like, I don't think he's really a number 1, right? But he's definitely not he's probably the number 1 on this team. Williams, I think, obviously can be a really, really good number 2 on his team. More of like a pass-leaning offensive ecosystem. Again, I just don't. I think there are a lot of receiver like potential landmines with the Garrett Wilson, who should get a lot of targets, but it's a run-heavy team. It's Justin Fields. That's kind of questionable. Marvin Harrison Jr. Again, I think these guys have. I can paint the ceiling case for all these players, and like I could see situations and certain scenarios where Garrett Wilson and Marvin Harrison Jr. are better than Brian Thomas Jr. this year, or better than Ladd McConkey this year, or better than Jackson Smith and Jigba this year, who go multiple rounds ahead of them. But I also feel like I could make that case for guys that go deep, deep, deep into the draft as well. So I just feel like receiver is very flat all throughout the draft. I don't know. Does any of that make any sense?
I don't think I would make that case necessarily for Marvin Harrison Jr. specifically, with respect to some of the other receivers you named. I mean, the ceiling case for Tyreek Hill, we're a year removed from Tyreek Hill being on pace for the all-time receiving yardage season, right? Like the ceiling for Tyreek Hill is still, I don't know, 1,900 yards. It's something. It's well beyond, I think, what we'd find from the receivers who went in rounds like 5 and beyond. I think, I don't know. He's a weird tier of his own kind of player, because there's obviously
he doesn't fit in the same like group of guys where we're kind of talking about like second to 4th year wideouts who again are all kind of in the same bucket. I think skill-wise, projection-wise, Tyreek obviously, if we knew he wanted to play for the Dolphins and,
right,
like all the way locked in and, there wasn't a police report every other month that, with his name on it, he probably wouldn't be going in the 3rd round.
Yes.
Also was 2 years younger. I think that's worth saying too. Also, isn't a speed receiver who's in his 30s at this point, but again, I digress.
Yeah. There's also another thing that became clear is that there's just a lack of like beyond Hunter and McMillan, who I think are very good pick. I think, oh man, I hate to give, I'm just noticing that producer Colin took T-Mac, and I was gonna say, I think it's pretty good value.
Yeah, we can edit this out. Yeah.
I hate to give undue credit to producer Colin, but McMillan.
By the way, can I stick on that in a second? I'll let you get back to McMillan actually, but I actually think if sorry, this is like just nobody cares about, literally nobody cares about our teams. They certainly don't care about producer Colin's team. But I feel like we could, throughout the course of his time here, go back and look at the first mock draft that we do after the draft, the NFL draft, and he always takes like just a load of rookies because he's he's so rookie pilled. I mean, again, we're talking Tootin, we're talking McMillan. He wanted props because he took Terrence Ferguson over Jake Ferguson to validate that he's not just a Cowboys homer. And I was like, dude, that's a bad pick. Like, he's a rookie tight end. He's probably not going to do anything behind Tyler Higbee this year. So again, we got to slam producer Colin as much as we can here. But yes, that is at least just worth noting here with the McMillan pick in round 8. So you can continue actually giving real analysis.
Yeah, no, I really like him, and yeah, obviously you've talked through McMillan at various points. He's a perfect fit for that team. They had a glaring need for it, like exactly his type and his role, and probably best X receiver potentially in the draft class. And I think he's just stepping into a spot where, if he stays healthy, it's 120 targets. It's maybe 140 targets. It's a ton of targets. So the workload there is just absolutely locked in. I do still like Travis Hunter ahead of him because there were just not very many players in this draft. Maybe Genty, among offensive players who are just as exciting as playmakers. And I've rarely seen people who have just the find the ball skills that Travis Hunter does. I think he's a very unique talent, potentially a unique talent in the history of the game. So like, I get Hunter ahead of McMillan, but I think McMillan was solidly the number 2. And then in my head, I'm willing to say that I don't know how the rest of the rookie receivers shake out, and I don't see a clear 3. I don't see a clear 3 at all, and I think there should be a pretty wide gap. And I'm trying to look and see exactly how wide the gap was. But yeah, like we go a couple more rounds before another rookie receiver comes off the board, and I think that's right. I don't think anybody else deserves consideration alongside McMillan and Hunter.
Yeah, I think it was not until like Buka in round 10 did another rookie come off, and
yeah, right.
And Egbuka's so interesting because he could be the Roma Dunze of this year, right? Where he's a really good player, but he's just stuck behind like 2 Pro Bowl receivers. Yeah. And what are you going to do about that? Yep. Like, you're not disrupting the hierarchy no matter what. But it's like, oh, he's a first round receiver. We thought the Bears offense was, for whatever reason, thought the Bears offense was going to be good last year. It obviously wasn't. We know the Bucs offense is going to be good. So there's at least there's a range of outcomes with him. I think the next rookie that went off the board was Matthew Golden in again, producer Colin. I mean, how do you want me to not make fun of you when you take Jalen Knoll at the end of round 13, another rookie? So Trey Harris went in the 13th round. I don't know what was going on here, but Matthew Golden slipped to round 14. I think Golden actually should probably be picked several rounds higher than that. So that's on me for missing that one. But yeah, there's definitely a lack of like clear cut rookie receivers. Like Matthew Golden should not be going behind Javonte Williams and in the same round as a bunch of kickers. Like, give me a friggin' break here. Gosh, so that was a little bit of a misstep on our part. But yeah, you're right. The lack of rookie receivers, I think, does make the position overall maybe a little bit harder to read, at least. But I think we kind of disagree about these rounds 6 to 9 receivers. But again, this is a conversation I want to have throughout the course of the offseason, really unspiral my thoughts on, because I'm not 100% sure how I feel yet. But let's close this out with a quarterback discussion here, Andy. You had a couple thoughts about that position.
I'm just amazed at the guys that weren't taken. And I think it makes I shouldn't feel this way, because if you're in a 10-person draft, in a one quarterback league, you shouldn't take a backup, right? Like, because the waiver wire, that's your bench at quarterback. Because the guys that don't get taken, I mean, the list is crazy. The list of quarterbacks who didn't get taken, again, 10 teams, one starting quarterback, but Justin Herbert didn't get drafted. Jordan Love didn't get drafted. Dak Prescott, who was the QB3 2 years ago and the MVP runner-up and led the league in touchdown passes, he didn't get drafted. Trevor Lawrence didn't get drafted, and his team just added Travis Hunter, and he's been a top 8 fantasy quarterback before. CJ Stroud didn't get drafted. Geno Smith, like, I don't know, you might not love that name, but like, Geno has been a top 5 quarterback in the recent past. Jordan Love has been a top 5 fantasy quarterback in the recent past. Justin Herbert has finished as the QB2 not that long ago. And then, Caleb doesn't get drafted. Stafford doesn't get drafted. McCarthy, Bryce Young, like a bunch of other interesting names who could break out in various ways. Like, I don't know, custom leagues where it's time. Like we should just all be in superflex leagues, unless your league has like 16 or more teams. It just feels wrong. It is the literal most important position in team sports, and total afterthought in fantasy. I still understand taking, like Josh Allen and Lamar and Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels all went like rounds 3 through 4 in our draft. And I think that's right, because one of those guys, all those guys have the potential to be like, 25, 26, 27 point per week scorers, given the dual threat ability and their passing ability. Like you should take those guys early. It's fine. Any of those guys could finish with 10 plus rushing touchdowns. I get it. But when they're gone and we're just into, the pure passers or dual threat guys that we don't really have a lot of faith in, man, you should probably be drafting your quarterback like right next to your kicker. There's not really a point in taking one in the middle rounds, because again, Dak Prescott and Jordan Love are sitting out there on the wire. And that's just, if this had been a 12-person draft, they probably get taken. But still, there'd be a bunch of names out there that, guaranteed, like lock it in. There's going to be like 4 guys that we didn't draft who ultimately finish as top 12 fantasy quarterbacks. And that's just a little weird to me.
No, it's a really fair point. And obviously, yeah, I mean, every league could be super flex and we'd feel really good about it, just with the wealth of quarterback options that you mentioned there. Yeah, it's just when we get to that point in the third round where I'm staring at Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, and Lamar Jackson. Give me those guys on my, and again, I did not manage to get one here. It just didn't work out. Give me those guys on my team over Tyreek Hill, over James Cook, over Breece Hall, Mike Evans, Chase Brown, friggin' Joe Mixon, who I took, Terry McLaurin. Like, give me those guys every single day of the week, over those quarterbacks, over those like wide receiver, running back options there. I just think your team is going to look so much better. And I think there's enough depth at running back, and in my opinion, enough like interesting receivers that could outkick their ADP that you can comfortably take a quarterback there and feel pretty good about. The thing is, though, that middle tier is dicey, as you mentioned. I think Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow, there's a tier, like you're dropping a tier to those guys, but they're fine picks. And, there's really, as long as Burrow stays healthy and his 2 receivers are healthy, which I get that was an if in 3 different directions, there's really no reason why he's not going to put up a monster passing season next year. I think you're right to say that the middle, like kind of that next tier of quarterbacks, because those 2 guys are kind of in their own grouping, it's not super comfortable. Like, you can't get me to take Kyler Murray in the mid rounds again. I'm not going to go through that experience. Yeah. Baker Mayfield is, a 7th round pick in our mock here. You took him in the 7th round. I don't know how comfortable you were with that, because I took Bo Nix in the 8th round. And I think Nix is actually really interesting if the Broncos offense coalesces, because he can run. And I want to find ways to get exposure to this Broncos offense this year. And I kind of think like Bo Nix might be the cheapest, because he's going to go later than Harvey, and he's certainly going to go later than Sutton. And like, I'm not really trying to mess around with the rest of the guys in the orbit there in the pass game. So I think he's kind of the cleanest way to get exposure to it. But Andy, again, like, how comfortable you with Baker Mayfield? How comfortable was I with Bo Nix when, like you said, there's maybe in certain universes where those guys get outscored by like a Dak Prescott or Trevor Lawrence?
For sure. Absolutely. Like, that's completely reasonable. And it's happened in the recent past, right? Like Dak did that a couple of years ago. Jordan Love did that a couple of years ago. It is probably the one thing that I would change in my draft, but it was a point where I was really, I was kind of testing the depth at running back and how long can I wait at running back. I don't think I would do that again though with Baker Mayfield. I will say, I think Baker Mayfield is a much better quarterback at this stage than Bo Nix, and I think his receiving options are better. So I do see a real difference there. But if I could do it over again, I would just not take a quarterback. That's maybe when I would dive back into the running back market, and I would just literally not take a quarterback until like round 15. If you told me going in that my choices at quarterback in the final round were going to be like, Brock Purdy got taken, but he got taken in the last round. I think if they were going to be Purdy and Jordan Love and Dak Prescott and Lawrence are all on the board, I am 100% waiting until the final round to take my quarterback.
Yeah, Purdy was in the same zone as a bunch of defenses and kickers. I think that's really fair, and it's definitely gonna. I don't know. I felt pretty good about picking Bo Nix in round 8. Mostly because I thought my receiver room was kind of set a little bit. I came away with T. Higgins, Zay Flowers, Rashee Rice, Travis Hunter. I thought that was a good 1 to 4, and like again, I like the paths to upside for Rice to beat that ADP. I think Travis Hunter is going to give you big weeks, but maybe I would have felt better plucking Brandon Ayuk, and again, maybe he's a second half of the season bet. I think Chris Olave could really beat that round 8 ADP if he stays healthy. I'm not the biggest Jerry Jeudy guy in the world, so I probably wouldn't have done that. But yeah, I don't regret the Bo Nix pick. I like it, but your point about these late round quarterbacks is really, really well taken.
I feel like there's a little subcategory there where I would include Justin Fields in it. I would include Bo Nix in it, where they have enough rushing upside. And of course, we've seen it with Fields. Fields has been a 1,000-yard rusher in the league. Bo Nix, if they decide, hey, we want Bo Nix to be a proactive rusher 8 times a game, that'll really change things. Because that's how Bo Nix finishes as a top 5 fantasy quarterback, right? I don't think he can do it as a passer. But I do think he can do it if they decide, oh, hey, we're gonna make running like a real recurring part of your game. If that happens, we know he can do it. He just sort of did it opportunistically and a lot of it early in the season last year. If that becomes like again a feature of the offense, it'll really unlock some fantasy value for him. So I think those guys in particular are, I can see it with them in the middle of the draft, because if they hit in all possible ways, they are pretty clearly contenders for like fantasy MVP and, top 5 status. I don't think it's their most likely outcome, but I could talk myself into it. Everybody else, like the pure passers, and I'd include, even though Baker Mayfield is a feisty and really fun runner, a little spitfire. I love him. He should probably be taken in the, like, we should think of him the same way that we think of Dak and Jordan Love and all those guys.
Yeah. Also, I feel like Justin Fields round 11, that's not going to hold. Like by the time we're drafting in August, and it's clear, like people have caught on like, oh, they gave him a contract where they're not really going to bench him, and every fantasy analyst is tweeting about his rushing ability like it's some newfound revelation that guys who run the football at the quarterback position are an advantage. Welcome to 2012, gang. Shoot, welcome to like 2008. I think it'll kind of be crystallized, and he'll probably be going, honestly. Even if you don't want to take him there, and I would be kind of mixed on it too. I bet you he goes in like round 8, round 9. But any other final parting thoughts on this mock draft, Andy? You want to dunk on anyone else? You want to call out a great pick that you liked? The floor is yours.
I think we need to call out again, producer Colin, for selecting, I think it was Drake May over Dak Prescott. That's wild. That was crazy. Again, invalidating his Cowboys fandom. Also, Dalton Del Don once again making a mock draft all about himself. I think that's worth talking about.
Well, I'll defend producer Colin the Drake May pick. May is someone that I do think if that offense comes together, he could actually have pretty significant fantasy upside too. Like I now that I'm thinking about it, I might rather have waited to round 11 to take Drake May than to take Bo Nix. I think they project pretty similarly. So maybe I'll give Colin a pass on that one. Although, as I said earlier, it took 5 rookies in this draft. Like again, just an untenable amount of rookies here. So there is that. What do you mean Dalton making a mock draft all about himself? Please explain.
Oh my gosh, Dalton having to go, like Dalton taking Jamar Chase first overall, and then receiver. Everything is a look at me pick. Brock Bowers in the second round. Come on. That's just Dalton performing.
A look at me pick. By the way, he was the one who took Fields in round 11. So pretty classic Dalton. Yeah, of course he did. I mean, hey, Dalton is a man of his word. You know, he came on the show yesterday and he talked about how he was higher than consensus on all these rookie running backs. And let me tell you what, with his team of Jamar Chase, Brock Bowers, Drake London, Devontae Adams, and then just Amarian Hampton, Travion Henderson. Like, although he did take Henderson and Ramondre Stevenson, not sure if I agree with that. But if those guys hit, it's going to be a pretty good looking team. But it would not be right to have a mock draft podcast and not have Andy Behrens take a slightly unnecessary shot at Dalton Del Don. That would just not make any sense. But Andy, that's going to do it for us today. Yes, in keeping with tradition. That's going to do it for us today. What else are you working on right now besides this mock draft write-up and you know, I'm sure some baseball content that you're just absolutely loving putting out there right now?
Yeah, mock draft write-up is coming out. You can probably find it as you are listening to this podcast. It's a wonderful companion piece to this podcast. And then we're going to have some baseball pickups at the end of the week. You don't need to hear about that. Next week, super excited for NFL schedule release. Everybody knows that's my favorite day of the year.
Yes, Andy was perfectly picked to be my co-host for the schedule release podcast, which is going to be next week. So whatever your excitement level is out there, listener, viewer, for the schedule release podcast, just know that Andy's excitement level, his enthusiasm is at least 5x of that. So
hey, listen, I loved the schedule release the first time when they did it in January, when they told us who everybody was playing, and I'm going to love it equally in May when they retell us.
That's right. Do you like how they told us earlier that they were going to be releasing the schedule? Like what day they're going to release the schedule? They told us at the draft, Andy.
Yeah,
that's
right.
Marketing.
It was murky last year, wasn't it? It was like, when is it going to drop?
Oh,
Who knows?
Oh, it's a state held secret there at the NFL offices. That is for sure. I know that having worked there. I mean, it is like you will be fired and potentially exiled out of the country if you release that schedule. You put anything out there about that schedule, they lock that thing down pretty heavily. But when that comes out, we will discuss it on this podcast, but not before next week. Scott Pianowski is going to join me to go over his post-draft fantasy power rankings. So exciting stuff on the feed next week. That is going to do it for today's show. Check you all next week on Tuesday with Scott to go over his post-draft fantasy power rankings. What are the offenses that you want to be invested in? Scott is going to tell you all of that. But until then, we are out.